Okay, huge news for Advanced Wars by Web. Big changes were just dropped today. Some CEOs have seen some changes, not necessarily rebalance changes, because they were adjusted to be more accurate to the cartridge games, right? To be more accurate to the Advanced Wars 2 or Advanced Wars DS CO versions. So there's 4 COs that were changed, and the community has kind of exploded because there's some people that love the changes, some people hate the changes, and you have people all over, in between. So it is a huge mess. People are discussing. So yeah. I just wanted to do a quick video, or somewhat quick, because I always have people complaining that my videos are too long or too short or whatever. I don't know, whatever. I'll just do whatever I think is good for the length of this video, but I just wanted to go over what has happened and explain the changes, because some people like this in video format. So, and I don't know, it's content, people love content, so let's do it. So, first off, the biggest change of all, probably, because this one is huge, is Kindle. And now, for a long time, people have been saying that Kindle superpower is not like in the games. So the super is supposed to add 3% of firepower per property that she owns. But on Advanced Wars by Web, it only counted cities and HQs, and that was it. So it wouldn't be counting bases, airport, ports, labs. But now it does. So that adds quite a bit of firepower to her superpower, to her scope. In a 3-base map with an airport, 3 base plus an airport plus a comm tower, your very standard map, right? That's 5 properties, 3%, that's 15%. Already 15% more, it's pretty good. Add to that a port or 2, maybe another airport, maybe a lab, stuff like that. And you're gonna get to 20%, if not more, very easily. And a 20% increase in firepower is very significant. Add that to any other CO, and people are gonna be going crazy. So definitely a significant amount of firepower, but mostly because of the thresholds that she's able to reach. When she has like 20 properties or so, like infantry against infantry or tank against tank, it is almost guaranteed, if not very close to one hit KO. So very close to 100% damage, or like 90%. It depends how many properties you have. If you have 2 comm towers or not, there's a lot of variables there. But the fact that it is now really close to that 100% mark makes it really strong. She's getting pretty much a buff. Kindle's getting a buff. Her super is giving her more firepower than it used to. And it is now going to be correct to Advanced Wars DS. And another big change, so with this, she is now being bumped up from tier 3 in standard up to tier 2 in standard. Blanket tier 2 for Kindle in standard. In all maps, she's going to be tier 2. Then in fog, she's going to remain in tier 3, but there are some discussions to whether see if she might be in tier 2 or not in some scenarios. That we'll have to see. We need some test games. And in high funds, she is going to be blanket tier 3, no more putting her in tier 4, kind of thing. So yeah, her super didn't change that much. It just gives her more firepower, but it just makes her even more viable in a late game scenario, which is what the other COs would strive more in, like Andy and Drake and stuff like that, like just getting to that late game build up using those supers. Now her super is even stronger than before, and so she doesn't really care if you go into a late game. She can start one hit KOing your units, break through your walls, and kill your stuff. So yeah. Next up we have Drake. So same tier. Drake actually got a nerf. So now his air units will go from 80% firepower down to 70%. So 10% less. So that's really weak. He has now the weakest air units in the game, and his naval units defense went from 125, I think it was. Now it's going to be reduced to 110. So he's just going to have less defense on navals. So what happens with Drake now? Well, you usually don't really build that much air units with Drake in Fog or Standard, but you do build a few copters here or there. They're really nice to like pretty much reduce the counterattack from a tank. You know, when you go and hit a tank, you don't really use Drake's copters to attack other copters unless it's on your super turn. But that now down to 70 is going to make it even harder. You're going to deal less damage to tanks. So even less chances that you're going to be making a copter with Drake. So it might be just all full land vehicles. Maybe in high funds, no. Maybe in high funds you still make some copters. You still make fighters. But you probably focus more on land. And in high funds you're going to focus on naval. His little defense nerf means that his units aren't going to be freaking unkillable on ports, right? With that 130 plus his 25 was like super mega defense. It made him pretty much tier 1 in heavy naval high funds maps. That's something that still has to be discussed and tested, but for now he's remaining in tier 2. He's not gonna drop. His super is still really strong, so high funds he's not gonna see any change. It's just because global damage is so strong. You get it all the time in high funds. But yeah, in standard and fog he's pretty much gotten a little bit of a nerf because now his air units aren't that strong. I guess black bolts on HQs on fog are gonna be you know, easier to kill for Drake or Drake's black bolts, because they're gonna have less defense. So just a very slight nerf there for Drake. And then next up we have Von Balt. Von Balt super Scop can now hit and stun his own unit. So his super will now have friendly fire, which is what it did in Advance Wars DS, Dual Strike, and targeting has been updated accordingly. So what this means is, you know how when Rachel missiles land or Sturm missiles land, it will hit his own units. Like if it does land, it will damage your units now. You know, with Von Balt, it will hurt your units by 3 HP and they will get stunned. But at the same time, it will also take that damage into account when calculating where to target, right? So it's like, if there are some of your units there, then it's going to reduce the value of that target and then it's going to get redirected somewhere else, right? So it's going to change how you can use the super. It is a very small nerf to Von Balt pretty much, because you used to be able to get in a big messy brawl being as Von Balt, then drop the missile and maybe it lands right there in front of your units as well, and it doesn't even matter because it doesn't even hit you. But now, no. Now you have to be a little bit more meticulous of how you position. You might hit one of your units by mistake if you're playing live or whatever. But I like that one. I like the Von Balt nerf. It's also more accurate, and he can get a nerf. Honestly, he's pretty strong, especially in standard. He's just pretty busted. And lastly, the fourth CO, we have Rachel's Scop the super. The only change is the missile of the infantry. What the infantry missile of Rachel's super does now, it kind of is like an HP missile, but only for infantry. It's not exactly that, but let's start with that, right? So it's gonna look only at infantry pretty much. It's gonna want to deal as much HP damage to foot soldiers. That's what the infantry missile is gonna be targeting at. So if you have a 3 HP infantry, a 2 HP infantry, it's going to be less valuable than a 4 HP or more. And then a 1 HP is going to be worth almost nothing. But there's something else. There's some modifiers, what it says here. And I think this will be explained somewhere on the side with a bit more detail, but pretty much it's like infantry that have 4 HP or more will count 4 times as much than any other unit. And so pretty much if you have a full HP infantry, it's gonna count as 4. But if you have that single infantry in one place and then you have 5 tanks in another, that missile will go and land where the tanks are, because there's 5 instead of 1 infantry times 4 for the modifier. So that's what Steeler, the dev that has been working on this, explained to me. I hope it's written down somewhere because it's gonna be confusing. But yeah, there's some logic there, but pretty much very broad terms. What helps me understand this one is that it's an HP missile for foot soldiers with some little math hidden underneath there for little tie breaks and stuff like that. So yeah, no more making your infantry bait with 1 HP infantry and stuff like that. No, now it's a little bit, it's like a slight buff to Rachel's missiles. And something to note for sure is that these changes will only go into effect for any game starting after midnight of August 13th. So any game that has started before that, if you're already playing a game or whatever, you're gonna have the previous stats of these COs. If your game is starting after this, then it will have those. There's no way of switching on or off. No, that's how it is. And then I guess some thoughts on this is that big changes for tier 3, right? We have Kindle, Drake, and Rachel being affected, which is almost all of the tier, well, like more than half. So the fact that Kindle is now no longer in tier 3 standard, for example, it's a pretty big deal because she tends to be the more aggressive CO of that tier, trying to keep in check all the stally COs and stuff like that. So now that she's no longer there, so she can no longer fulfill that role, your next aggressive CO is going to be Lash. And I mean, I think that's great. Lash is awesome. Lash is a lot of fun. She definitely struggles with powers because her power is not that, I mean, it is good, but it's too expensive. But yeah, like if you want to be aggressive in a match, then you're gonna have to go with Lash. Try to really use that day to day. She's gonna be your like softer Kindle because she still gets that plus 30% firepower on cities, so she can camp on those terrains and get into fights and try to win that way, take control of the map. But yeah, Lash is gonna be your aggressive one. In a sense, Andy is really happy about this because Kindle tends to be Andy's nightmare, as well as Drake, because of that super being able to kill stuff. But Kindle is like, you use Urban Blight, boom, you kill a tank with one tank from a city. Like that's stuff that Andy hates. And so now Andy's gonna be much happier. It's gonna be his units are gonna be more. They're gonna live more often, no? So he's gonna be able to heal them up. So definitely Andy. We might see a lot of Andys now getting picked on tier 3, but I think that Lash can still do really well. Drake is a little bit nerfed, so he is gonna struggle with making air units. So he'll probably not make any air units. And then Rachel got a tiny little buff. But I think, yeah, just the absence of Kindle in that tier, in tier 3 standard, is going to shake up a lot of things. I'm kind of excited to see what happens and how people play around it and see what people come up with. If we see more Lash being played to be more aggressive. And then at the same time, I wonder about tier 2 because now Kindle is introduced in tier 2 in standard. And she's going to be fighting along the sides of Max, Eagle, Olaf, and Sammy. Can she fight against Max in standard? Like, Max is pretty much the king of tier 2 in standard most of the times, especially in small, medium kind of sized maps. If not, sometimes Olaf, but Max is always really, really strong. That plus movement and plus firepower. So we'll see. I'm excited to see what happens. I think Kindle can definitely do pretty well in the most earliest of stages of a game. Those infantry fights when you try to contest a city and stuff like that, and you get interrupted by someone, then you go and hit back from the city. Like, I think she needs to really get out of her comfort zone. I think maybe Kindle was too comfortable in tier 3 because everyone was picking her in tier 3 and with a lot of sense. Like, she is really strong and she was always borderline too much for tier 3 and in standard. I'm talking specifically for standard. And so with this small buff, I'm not sure if it's small or medium kind of buff, it kind of justifies to finally push her up to tier 2 because, I don't know, maybe we see some interesting things in tier 2. In standard, usually you don't see much Eagle. maybe some Olaf. It kind of depends on the map and the kind of player, but I think it's gonna be interesting, and hopefully she can do well. You know, we want all the COs in the tier to be viable. Now we want variety. I think that's what's best for the game, to have variety, you being able to pick different COs according to your playstyle or what you want to do, whatever. But yeah, I want to hear you guys' thoughts. What do you think? What do you think of these changes? Do you think they're good? Do you not like them? Thank you for watching. I hope you liked it, and yeah, bye-bye.